Well, The Australian is reporting that the Albanese government could be having second thoughts about unveiling its 2035 emissions reduction target. Now, the target's supposed to be made public in February next year, but it sounds like the government is not convinced it would be a good idea to announce the target prior to the election. Matt, I wonder why the government would balk at releasing an emissions target.
Well, I think the main reason here is the Labor government is preparing for minority government. They're keeping their powder dry on issues like this, so they can keep some things in the bottom drawer to pull out when they, I think, inevitably may have to negotiate with Teals and Greens after the election. And so it'll be, if you vote for the Labor Party at this election, you'll be giving them in effect a blank cheque to, after the election, write out a massive IOU to the Greens and Teal parties. And I don't think that's fair to the Australian public, but, you know, the Australian public have a chance to see through that and not vote for a Labor Party that cannot commit to what they'll actually do in the next term of government, because they'll probably, to form government, need the support of Greens and Teals. And, of course, the Greens and Teals will want that emissions target to be as high as possible. Now, I think what we just need to do, though, the overall issue here is let's just drop all of these targets. It's just absolutely absurd. We have an economy tanking. We have massive geopolitical risks on our doorstep. None of those countries to the north of us are taking climate targets seriously. It's about time we drop these absurd climate change targets, and focus on the only target that matters right now, a cost of living target, to bring down inflation for people and get our standard of living back up to a reasonable level.
Well, taking you up on that point, Basil, I wanted to ask you, if Trump wins and pulls out of the Paris Agreement, as he did last time he was in power, and if the rise of Conservatives in Europe continues, then Australia could set an ambitious emissions target only to end up out on a limb all on its own.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think the ambition on its own is fine. The ambition to get towards net zero, no problem. We should all be striving for a more sustainable future. No argument with that. But locking ourselves into targets that are more than likely going to be unachievable does nobody, including the industry that is there to try and help us get to those targets, any good. Our best bet is to work our way towards net zero, keep the lights on, keep the costs down, and get there when we do. Locking ourselves into unachievable targets does nobody any good at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other point you make there, and it's a point well made, unachievable. We're barely going to make, or barely on track to make, the 2030 target. You know, the cost of power is through the roof. We're being warned about potential blackouts. So for the government prior to the next election then to trumpet a brand new target of whatever it's going to be, 60% or whatever, is only going to frighten everyone even more. So I can understand their reticence. While we're on the subject of targets, Swedish car maker Volvo has become the latest big-name manufacturer to scrap its green energy dreams. They've dropped their promise to go all-electric by 2030. Matt, Volvo are known for the safety of their vehicles, but clearly they don't want to take a risk with renewables and electricity and their business plan going forward.
Well, I'm just glad, James, that the principle that the customer is always right is re-establishing itself. I mean, that's the way it should work. That's the way a good, well-functioning market should work, is that the car companies, the manufacturers of any good, are actually there to serve the interests of the customers, not there to serve the interests of governments, not there to serve the interests of activist green movements that want to establish arbitrary targets on different numbers. What Volvo should be in the business of doing is producing cars that people want to drive. And look, some people are happy to drive an electric vehicle. Good luck to them. There's no problem with that. It's a free country. But clearly, these electric vehicles are not suitable for many people, large families, people with long commutes. People have to, in the bush up here, have to travel long distances, often to and from work and anywhere else they want to go. It's just not going to work. So we need to have a proper market that just delivers for consumers. So I think that is re-establishing itself. And like all of these ridiculous targets, we're going to see them fall like dominoes in the years ahead, because the promises we've been made will soon be bitten by that inevitable dog called reality. That'll happen, and when reality catches up with it, a lot of people will be very embarrassed.
Well, one of the interesting things that Volvo said in this announcement was that they wanted stronger government policies to support electrification. Basil, isn't that just a fancy-sounding admission that people won't buy EVs without government coercion?
Precisely what it's saying. And these big car manufacturers, and Volvo, by the way, are not the first one to go down this path. We've seen a reversing of stated ambition from a number of the big manufacturers. They're not mugs. They're in the business of making cars and making money. And if they're backing away from full electric, that tells you one thing and one thing only. It's not sustainable financially for them in the current environment. And again, it's another reason why targets just don't work. If we're going to get there, let's get there when we get there. But trying to get there ahead of time can only cause these sorts of problems. And I think and the other point, of course, is we don't really know what happens at the end of the life of the battery that's in the electric cars yet. Most people are now starting to tell us you're going to have to throw the battery away and probably get a brand new car. It's not like you can take the battery out and put it in. And where does the battery go then? And what happens to the rest of the car? There's all of those things to deal with. And that's what happens when you're just racing ahead to targets.
Yeah, very well said. I couldn't agree more. The dust is finally starting to settle after Jim Chalmers' big day out yesterday, where he spun those disastrous GDP figures as if they were some kind of achievement. But for all the Treasurer's hard work, I don't think anyone was buying what he was selling. The reaction to the data has been less than enthusiastic, you could say. Matt, can you claim to be winning by keeping the country out of recession by record spending that's fueling inflation?
Well, you can't, James. You can't, because every Australian household knows that what the Treasurer is trying to sell matches nothing like the reality they're facing. I mean, the Treasurer is effectively in the business now of telling people to ignore their lying eyes. They can see themselves their standard of living falling. And if you look deeper into the economic statistics on a per-person basis, the standard of living of the average Australian household has fallen back to levels we haven't seen since 2011. We've gone back, in just 2 years of this Labor government, we've gone back 13 years. And that's never been, it's just an unprecedented reduction, and everybody can feel that. And then the Treasurer is trying to say, no, you've never had it better. You've got a great government that's doing great jobs. It's not going to work. I just think, I'm not in the business of giving the Labor Party advice, but I do think it would be better if we could find some leaders who would tell us the truth, level with us, and then come up with real solutions, not handouts, not little sugar hits, but real solutions that could get us out of this hole. And the longer the Treasurer continues to try and tell us fairy tales, the sooner he's going to find himself having a pretty nasty ending.
Yeah, well, Basil, record spending and just bringing more and more people into the country hardly sounds like a financial plan.
It's adding to inflation, we know that. You're a nice bloke, Jim Chalmers. I'm tempted to say I feel a bit sorry for him. There are some jobs from the other side of the fence that probably look like they're pretty easy when everything's going well. Not sure that Treasurer of this country is one of them, but I tell you what, when things aren't going so well, it doesn't look like an easy job then. And right now, Jim Chalmers looks like he's got the hardest job in the country and that he is not enjoying one bit of it. This is a tough sell, and he's not doing a very good job of selling our financial position to the Australian public at the moment, because what everyday Australians understand is the cost of living. And is the cost of their everyday existence going up? Yes, it is. That's the language everyday Australians understand. And on that score, he's being marked with a big cross.
Now, I've got to go to a break, but before I do, Basil, I want to get your tip. I know you're an AFL lover. Who's going to win the premiership? The finals start today. Who's going to win?
5 teams can win it, I reckon, but Sydney have been the best team all year. So Sydney, but they're going to need a little bit of luck.
There you go. All right, I'll hold you to that tip, and we'll check in a few weeks whether or not you were right. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.